You're in for a real treat this morning. We have a gentleman named Jeff J. who's going to come and speak with you. And we had a chance to have dinner last night with Jeff, and later on in the evening he gave a presentation at the family group member meeting. And he not only gets his message across very clearly, but it's very entertaining. I'll tell you folks, this guy has done his research. He knows his stuff. He works in collaboration with his wife, Deborah. And I mentioned earlier, if you haven't seen it, there is a book signing that is taking place out in the lobby. Jeff will be selling and signing the books after this. And the book is called Love First. He's going to give you a chance to get a preview of it. He's come all the way here from Detroit, Michigan, so let's please give him a very healthy Texas welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right. I've got to tell you, I am so blown away by Rise Recovery and PDAP and everything they put together. I can't possibly thank everybody that I've gotten to meet in the last little while, but please give them another round of applause. What they've done is amazing. I'm going to depart from my normal talk here for a moment because in the 24 hours that I've been in San Antonio, I've been so impressed with what's going on in this organization. I travel all over the country and even the world sometimes, giving talks, doing interventions, interfacing with clinicians and families and so forth. And what you have here is a tremendous jewel, a tremendous jewel. There are so many clinical programs out there right now that are segmented into their hours and their minutes and their offices and everything else. What you have here with Rise Recovery and PDAP is real connection, real relationship, and real love. You can't put a price tag on that. You can't teach it. You can't get a degree in it. You can't find it except within the passion, the spirit, and the love of the people at the ground level, like Trish. Trish is the real McCoy, and everybody that's working with her, I mean, it's tremendous. The highlight of my day yesterday was going over to Ironside and just hanging out on the couch for an hour or so. It was really, really great. And so I just filled out one of those cards myself. And I hope that all of you will dig deep, not just today, because everybody, a lot of the cards have already been collected, but I want to tell you, this is, I'm just departing from my talk. This organization is like very few in the country. It really needs to go all over the nation. It could replace a lot of very mediocre, programs. And I will tell you, it could replace a lot of very good programs because it's better. And your help today, your help next year and the year after can help Texas take this message further, take this program further, take it, throughout the state, beyond the state. I hope you'll really help them do it because it's a great group of people. So anyway, thanks for that. So let's see what I'm supposed to talk about. My name's Jeff J. I am a recovering addict. This is what one looks like. And, I can dress up all right, but I didn't get here because of any great merits of my own. When I was in high school, when I started drinking and drugging, I actually still at that point looked good on the outside, and I fooled a lot of people. I was a National Merit Scholar. I was president of my high school student association. Nobody could know by looking at my outsides what was going on the inside, that I was really a budding alcoholic and drug addict. By the time I was 26 years old, I was homeless, penniless, living on the streets out in California. I had a bleeding ulcer, a bleeding colon, and early transient neuropathy of the legs. I did not think that I had an alcohol or drug problem. I just thought I had a little cash flow problem. And, if you would loan me $20, just, everything would be fine. And that's the way it is with people that are suffering from this illness. Regardless of a lot of the consequences and so forth, it takes a lot for us to wake up. And so it is with families, too. A lot of us, we brush it under the rug. My parents thought I was just going through a phase. And when I got into trouble, they would cover it up. They would smooth it over. They would take the consequences away. They wouldn't really reach out for help to other people. They would lie, frankly. They would even really kind of, just do whatever was required to get me out of the trouble that I was in until they finally got the help that they needed to turn around. And that's what brought hope into the system, into the family system. Because one thing that we lose, both the addicted person and the family, is this most important thing: our integrity, our honor, honesty, good character, etc. These things get sucked down into the maw and the morass of addiction. Because as the old saying goes, and especially for family members, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We want to do the best for our children, of course. Above all things in life, we want to do the best for our children. We don't want to see them get into trouble. And we automatically do a lot of wrong things. Because what is required to deal with this illness is often counterintuitive, as I'll talk about in a little while as we get into the talk. And so we make mistakes. And we gradually start doing things that we never thought we'd do before. Look, when I started to mess around with things when I was a kid, I wasn't raising my hand and saying, oh, I know, I want to be a drug addict when I grow up. That's the thing for me. We all think we're too smart for that. I'm never going to be like that guy. I'm never going to be like her. I'm never going to be like him. I'm going to be different. And the same with families. Oh, sure, Susie might be having a little trouble right now, but it's not, we're not like those people. You know those people. They're different than us. We rationalize, and things get worse and worse and worse. I remember a family that I was dealing with, and I was talking about this last night, and the father was actually in long-term recovery himself. But his enabling had gone over the deep end. Why? Because of fear. Fear of what could happen. Fear is what drives us as families, as parents, to do the wrong things. Because we're afraid something terrible is going to happen to our precious Joe or our precious Susie. Okay? So he was actually, although he was in long-term recovery himself, when his son, who'd become addicted to heroin, would call him, he would actually leave his suburban home, drive downtown, and buy heroin, which he would then deliver to his son who was in a motel because he didn't want the son on the street and he didn't want him consorting in the dope house. It was absolutely crazy. And yet this is what the disease had brought him to. He was sacrificing and losing his own integrity in a desperate hope to hold things together. Things didn't change for him until the phone rang during Thanksgiving dinner one time, and it was the son calling everybody else, and he was like, okay, I'll leave right away, the dad. And he hangs up and he starts to leave Thanksgiving dinner, and the rest of the family just said, no, we've got to stop now. We've got to stop. We've got to have an intervention. We've got to get him into treatment. Enough is enough. So how do we do that? That's something I'm going to talk about. There's actually a long history here. And what we want to do in the long run is restore the family's integrity. That's where it all starts. A lot of times we think we have to start with the identified patient, okay, the person who's addicted. Really, we want to start with the whole family. That's the beauty of PDAP and RISE recovery, by the way, dealing with the whole family from the very beginning. We want to restore family integrity, telling the truth, working together, learning together. You know, it's amazing. Mothers Against Drunk Driving, I don't know if you know their history at all, but it's amazing. 2 women had a very unusual idea back in the day. Because back in the day, it was nothing to drive intoxicated. You know, 30, 40 years ago, it was commonplace. But 2 women decided that we needed to have a zero tolerance for drunk driving. Okay? And they started an organization called MAD that literally changed the way we look at this in the United States and gradually brought around the tightening in the laws, the increases in treatment, and so on and so forth. 2 women who decided that they couldn't put up with it anymore. What we need today is a zero tolerance for untreated addiction in the family. Okay? We live in a drinking and drugging culture. It's part of who we are. This is not going to change anytime soon, if ever. It's something we have to deal with. And the fact is that the majority of people can use alcohol and other things without serious consequences. But there is a reliable and clear minority of people, 10 to 20%, who sometime in their lifetime will develop severe problems with substances. And these are the people that we've got to take care of. These are the people like me. I didn't raise my hand and say I want to be an addict, but it happened. For a long story that I won't get into today. And what we need is help. We need help from people like PDAP, but we need help first and foremost from the family. And it's actually kind of an old idea. You may have heard of an organization called Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, who changed the face of addiction treatment way back when in 1935. What you might not know is that Bill Wilson, who is already sober, he's pouring coffee there in the middle, was visiting Akron, and he realized that he needed to talk to another alcoholic and carry to him a message of hope in order for he himself, Bill Wilson, to stay sober, whether or not the other guy did. And he got connected to Dr. Bob, but Dr. Bob, who was an alcoholic, didn't want to talk to him, didn't want to have the meeting. It was probably intervention number 1. Because the friend who was putting them together, Henrietta Seiberling, who you see on the right there, I think Henrietta Seiberling could be on this board. Doesn't she look like a woman who won't take no for an answer? You know? I mean, I don't know who Dr. Bob thought he was, but, you know, no was not going to get very far. And on the other side, on the left, is Ann Smith, his wife. And it's those 2 women who insisted that Dr. Bob talk to Bill Wilson. He finally relented and said, okay, but no more than 15 minutes. They talked for 4.5 hours, and out of that meeting came the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and ultimately the 12 steps which have been adapted by PDAP. So, what are we really talking about here? Let's talk about, because, you know, a lot of times it's a little bit fuzzy. You know, okay, it's a disease. What do we mean it's a disease? Come on, you can drink or you can't drink, right? I mean, what are we talking about? Let me introduce you to the human brain. Normal 3D images of a human brain seen from the right side, left side, top, bottom. Okay, looks nice and smooth and everything else. All right? Let's see how drug use changes that. 17 years of weekend drinking. How's that brain look to you? What kind of decisions do you think are going to be made? Good decisions? Daily drinking, long term. Here's a 24 on the left there, 24-year-old using cocaine for 2 years. That is not a good-looking brain. Methamphetamine, 8 years of heavy use. Interesting, again, On the left, marijuana, 18-year-old using 3 years, 4 times a week. Already that brain is looking not good. Interesting, here's a supposed treatment for opiates, methadone, 7 years, previous heroin, 10 years. That brain is not getting better, but brains do get better. Here's before and after recovery. We used to think that the brain did not regenerate brain cells. That is false. It does. We do get better. Here's the same view after 1 year alcohol and drug-free. This is the hope of recovery. This is the hope of RISE recovery and PDAP. We can make a difference. When we talk about intervention, we're really talking about building a language of understanding. I want to say one more thing about the brain, though, before I move on to this. When we talk about addiction, we're talking about something that's mental, physical, and spiritual. You've already seen the physical side of it. But when we're asking people to change, when we're asking people to make big changes in their life, we shouldn't underestimate the spiritual power required to do that. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about addiction or any other chronic illness. If I were to have a heart attack today, if I were to fall down and, survive the heart attack and wake up tomorrow, the doctor is going to say a couple of things to me. He's going to say, if you change your diet, lay off the French fries and the red meat and all the potato chips and everything else, and change your exercise, you're going to die of something else in 30 years. Easy words to say, very hard words to do. And nearly 90% of people who get that message are back within 2 years with another heart attack, if they survive it at all. The message that I'm trying to give you is that when dealing with chronic illnesses like heart disease, like addiction, global change is tremendously difficult. It's not that we don't have good treatments. It's not that we don't know what to do. It's that it's very, very hard for the patient to do it. It is a global change that's required, and that requires a spiritual change. Okay? It really means coming to believe in something greater than ourselves, because when we're locked in addiction, it's all about the me, 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 I. When we come into recovery, it's God working through people, the big we, so that the relationship with God is both horizontal and vertical. It's an important part of what PDAP and RISE recovery communicates, and it's essential. We don't realize in medicine how many illnesses are exactly this way. We get romanced with the idea that there's going to be a pill or there's going to be an operation. And for some acute illnesses, that's the truth. If I go down on the stage with appendicitis right now, it's true. An operation will fix it. For chronic illnesses, that is not the case. It often requires global change, and there is a tremendous spiritual component in that. With intervention, there is too, and it begins with building a language for understanding. This is an important idea. Language shapes the way we think. It determines what we can even think about. If we don't have the language for it, we don't get it. Aristotle's first idea in building science is that we start naming things. We identify what they are. That's the power of language. Speaking of the power of language, it can work in the negative. And here are the 3 most damaging myths that we deal with when dealing with chronic chemical dependency. Number 1, you can't help an addict unless he wants help. You hear it all the time. You hear professionals say it who should know better. But it begs the question, if you can't help an addict until he wants help, what will get him to want help? There are things we can do to move that process along. Betty Ford who is maybe the most famous intervention in the United States, reflects on this herself. She says, "I hadn't a clue what an intervention was when I became the focus of one a quarter century ago. The first one didn't take. I was angry with both my daughter, Susan, and Dr. Joe Cruz, who dared to trespass into my home and suggest I had a problem. I rose up on my high horse and threw them out. I try not to think about it too often, as I feel ashamed and embarrassed when I do. But the second intervention had a different ending. Surrounded by the family who loved me, this intervention saved my life." The second most damaging myth is that treatment won't work if she doesn't want it. Not true. In fact, it's a lot like physical therapy. It's not how you get into treatment that counts. Click, please. It's what happens once you're there. I said it's a lot like physical therapy, and it is. You know, if you have the bad luck to get run over by a Mack truck or something like that and break every bone in your body and you've got to go through physical therapy to learn how to walk again, it's no fun. I haven't been there, but I can imagine. You know, it hurts and it's difficult and your physical therapist might not be the favorite person in your life, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you like it, whether you believe in it, whether you want to do it or not. You've got to get up and learn to take the steps. It's very much true in treatment too. A lot of people early on have a tremendous amount of resistance, but if they stick with it, if they stay in it, whether they want to or not, it rubs off. Especially when you have a program like this one that is all about connection, all about love. Makes all the difference. As they said to me, not in this program, but another many years ago when I was in treatment, we'll love you until you can love yourself. Third most damaging myth, an alcoholic must hit bottom, taking along even the smallest children. It's a crazy idea, this idea that we have about hitting bottom. And it's something that you'll hear a lot. Oh, they just got to hit bottom. There's nothing more we can do. It's kind of our get out of jail free card. We don't have to do anything anymore. It's actually the biggest cop-out in the world. But what is bottom? For a lot of people, it's a lot of different things. We see people going in and out of jail. It's not bottom for them. We see them overdosing. It's not bottom for them. For a lot of people, their bottom has no bounds. The overdose results in death. Where's the bottom? This is an idea, this is a word in our vocabulary, this hitting bottom, that we need to lose as far as letting people hit bottom. And instead, talk about how can we raise the bottom to right now so that we move into recovery. And this is, again, as the last one was a little bit talking about parents who have addiction problems. This is from Joe Califano. Bluntly put, the time for parents, the time that parents need to conquer their substance abuse and addiction can pose a serious threat to their children who may suffer permanent damage during this phase of rapid development. Little children cannot wait. They need safe and stable homes and nurturing adults now in order to set the stage for a healthy and productive life. Structured family intervention is a way to go. There's workplace intervention, impaired professional intervention, medical intervention, legal intervention. Love legal intervention. Soft intervention, informal intervention, crisis intervention, invitational intervention. I'm just going to touch on a little bit of it right now. And I'm going to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts about how this works. I'm not trying to do a whole seminar on intervention, but I want to give you an idea. I just want to give you a flavor for how this thing works. First of all, we want to think about intervention as the golden rule. What's the golden rule? Everybody knows what it is. You're supposed to treat others as you would want to be treated. Think of this yourself. Say you had some sort of an illness that got you onto medication. You got addicted. You yourself got addicted to opioid pain medication and really went downhill. A couple of years go by, you are a mess. You are losing things. You are out of control. You keep promising yourself, I'll quit tomorrow. You never do. It gets worse and worse and worse. What would you want your family to do? Would you want them to stand by? Would you want them to say, well, he just needs to hit bottom? She just needs to hit bottom? Or would you want them to take action? Always think of that with yourself. A no uttered from the deepest conviction is better than a yes merely uttered to please, or what is worse, to avoid trouble. We have to be able to stand on our integrity as families, let our no be no, our yes be yes, and demand an end to untreated addiction within our families. First of all, recovery requires accountability. But let's get into the real building blocks to the intervention and the spiritual implications around them. Some key concepts in intervention. Intervention is not something we typically do alone. We want to bring together an intervention team, and it's easy to figure out who should be on the team. Who are the most important people in the addict's life? Who are the family members and friends who have played a positive role in their life and are a natural part of the intervention team? We want to take that set of people who naturally come in the disease, part of the enabling system. They don't mean to, but they do, and we want to turn that enabling system into an intervening system. Because when we do that, the addiction really can't live. And there's a way to do it. The intervention team in the long run will become the recovery team. They will be the support system which is fostered by PDAP and RISE Recovery to keep the person on track along with the larger recovering community. When we're creating a team, the first thing to do is just bring the people together. It's easy to say, but you've got to just get the meeting to happen. You've got to bring together whoever the family members are, the key family members. Maybe you can identify one or two friends, old friends. Maybe they're not hanging out with them anymore, but they were there through thick and thin once upon a time, and they will be again. Bring this team together and let's talk. Let everybody share their view of the situation. Everybody's got their take on it. Maybe Grandma and Grandpa don't really know what's going on, but getting them to listen to what everybody else is saying will really help galvanize the team and make it a true structured family intervention. We start by simply talking about how do we know that there's a problem? What have we seen? What have we experienced? What do we know firsthand? We're not going on hearsay. What can we share with each other so that we really get an idea of the scope of the problem? Gathering that history will automatically, I guarantee you, create urgency and get the team moving forward. Something's going to happen here. Actions are going to be taken. It also creates a common language that we can start talking about. And if we can get people to start learning about the illness, about what treatment options are out there, then we have a common language for taking action. The initial team training is important. We want to get people to write down what they're going to say in the intervention in the form of letters. There's a 7-point process we're going to go through. We're going to anticipate what the objections are going to be. What do I mean by that? Every addict has a boatload of objections about why they can't go to treatment right now, why people don't understand. You know, you don't get me, it's all your fault. If you've ever tried to talk to a young person or a middle-aged person or an old person about their chemical dependency problem, if you've ever tried to have a little conversation in the kitchen about it, what happens in about 2 minutes? You find out you're the problem. It's the old blame game. We want to anticipate all the ways that that might be played out in advance of the intervention itself so that we're fully prepared. We have also want to take the time to prepare bottom line consequences, which are simply the natural consequences which we will allow to flow if the person doesn't accept help right now. And then, of course, concentrating on all the details. Where's treatment going to be? How are we going to manage things? Are there bills that need to be paid, schools that need to be talked to, jobs, and so forth? Strengthening the intervention team. I want to talk about the persons that we're going to intervene on. What are their strengths? What are the positives that we're going to want to build on as we bring them into recovery? Let's make sure that those are first and foremost in our mind. This is an intervention that's based on love and concern. It's not about finger pointing. I want to talk about those things in the preparation for the intervention. Sometimes there are some important points that need to be made to aunts and uncles and grandmothers and grandfathers and others who might unwittingly sabotage early recovery and even treatment. We don't want to criticize them, but we want to give them some aha moments. Money is the fuel of addiction, okay? And we've got to figure out how we're going to cut off those easy access points that come from Aunt Mary or Uncle Al. Who has leverage? How can it be used most subtly? We don't want to use a baseball bat when we can just put a hand on the shoulder. The person that we're intervening on is not stupid. Who has influence? Sometimes influence is so much more important than leverage. I remember an intervention that I did on a retired Air Force pilot, and he was a real tough guy. He was about 52 years old. He was in great physical condition, and he was just tough as nails, you know, and was a big-time alcoholic. And he worked for a small defense contracting company. And his boss was a retired general. And so for the intervention, we had the general. He was going to lose his job if he didn't go to treatment. We had his wife, who was fed up. She was going to leave him. We had his sister, and we had his mother, who weighed about 89 pounds soaking wet. I think she was about 82 years old, this little thing. And when we got to the intervention, this guy just sat there stoically. I mean, he just, you know, he's getting showered with love and concern and a plan and all kinds of stuff. And he's sitting there like he's, you know, under interrogation at the Hanoi Hilton. You know, I mean, it was just unbelievable. Nothing would move him. We ultimately had to go to the bottom lines. He was losing his job. He's like, take it. The wife's going to leave him. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. You know, he doesn't care. We were out of leverage, but we weren't out of influence. His mother was there with her bottom line letter, and her hands were shaking. She was getting so emotional, and she just put it down, and she just started to cry. She said, I just want my son back. And he started to cry. And he said, I'll go. Those aren't magic abracadabra words that she said. My point is that we should never underestimate the power of emotional influence, that power of love in motivating someone to take appropriate action. Oftentimes, the more forceful means are not what's going to work. But you never know until you play the game. The power of the group is the thing. The power of that family and friends group. I'm going to race through some of this because we're going to be a little bit... Where are we on time? Somebody tell me. Ouch. We're really going to move fast now. A lot of power in the group. Take my word for it. But you know, the reason that I put so much emphasis on the group and on the family is this last point. Intervention, in a lot of ways, is like a spiritual wrestling match. And just like a real wrestling match, if you have, you know, two guys getting in the ring and they're going to go at it, well, you've got a real wrestling match. But if you have one guy going in the ring with 8 other people, it's not so much of a wrestling match. The power is in the group. The power is in the love of the group and in those numbers. I'm about to go through something right now that I am going to short circuit in the interest of time. I was going to take you through the 7-point letter writing process that is so powerful in writing intervention letters. But I'm going to race through it in the interest of time because there's more that I want to get to. But very quickly, there are 7 parts of the letter. The first is identification, really working on the power of relationship. The second part of the letter is the love part of the letter. This is the longest part of the letter. It's not about facts. It's not about blaming. It's not about, reading the person the riot act. What we really want to talk about is why we love them, why we care about them. And we want to talk about specifically times that we've been proud of them, times that they've been there for us. It's exactly 180 degrees different than what they are expecting to hear. And it can even include some humor. In the third part of the letter, we talk about reframing. We want to emphasize a new understanding that we've taken the time to learn about this disease, and we understand it's a medical problem that requires professional treatment. We really want to take the judgmental part out of all of this. Then we want to move on very briefly to what the facts are. Why are we concerned about it? We want them to be specific, firsthand, no judgmental language, and keep it very, very brief. And actually, the more poignant, the better. Number 5 is a commitment that everybody's going to make to be part of the recovery process. And a lot of times that's really hard because you're not lucky enough to be living in a neighborhood where you've got PDAP and RISE recovery, because they really make it possible for that to happen in a big way. And we want them to be part of the family recovery. After all of this, then we finally get down to asking them to accept some help. Right now, today, because we've got the plan ready to roll. We're not fooling around. We've got everything ready, every I dotted and T crossed. And we don't leave any room for delay. And we end on a note of affirmation. On a positive note, showing faith in the person that if they follow the path that we're laying out for them, that we're all going to trod together, that things are going to be much better than they could ever envision, and that we're going to do this as a family. I'm also going to race through this too. Planning, planning, planning is the key to a successful intervention. We do a lot of training, we do a lot of rehearsal, and we want to make sure. And the closer, often, we want to have the last letter read. I mean, you can only imagine we've got the person with the problem in the room, we have all the most important people in their life sitting around in a circle, and we're all going to take time to read these beautiful, loving letters, and people are often reduced to tears in them, even the most recalcitrant addicts. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I remember this one family had me all set up for, thinking my life was going to be in danger. I mean, this guy that we were intervening on, he was just really a bad guy. When he would get high, he would just knock people out. I mean, like his mother, his wife, and stuff like that. Just, it's very. And the only time we could figure out to intervene was when he was coming in from hunting. He would be coming into this little shack, and he'd have a rifle under his arm. But I'm like, well, whatever, It's a new adventure. And there were about 11 of us. And he came in the door with the rifle, and he agreed, right away to sit down and talk, which amazed everybody. And I couldn't believe it. It was like the second or third letter, he said, okay, I'll go. I could have knocked me over with a feather, But you never know how these things are going to go. It's amazing the power that the group can have. Another family told me the same thing. Oh, this guy, I mean, he is a dope fiend, alcoholic, crazy man. I mean, he's going to come in here. There's going to be a fight. I'm telling you, there's going to be a fight. No, there wasn't a fight. You know why? Because when he walked in the door, the first person he saw was his grandmother. And the second person he saw was his aunt who lived 3 states away. He knew immediately what it was all about and burst into tears. This big, bad dope fiend just burst into tears. And everybody hugged him. We sat down. Yes, he fought it. But he went, and he did well. So the closer is usually the most trusted person. It's usually the senior family member. and it's eye to eye, and it's really all about, will you just say yes? And it's amazing how many times we get through it right then. I'm going to skip over the objections too, because we must be down to 5 or 6 minutes right now. But we want to anticipate all of these things and make sure that we have our ducks in a row. We want to know what all the answers are ahead of time. It's not hard to brainstorm what the objections are going to be. I can't get into this. It takes too long. The bottom line on bottom lines is that we want to take the family to a point of saying, yes, we love you, we care about you, but if you're not going to accept the help that's being offered today, your addiction can no longer trump the welfare of the family. Okay? We've got to take care of ourselves. We've got to take care of everybody else in this family, and the help's always going to be available to you, but your addiction can't take first place. You can almost organize all the possible bottom lines around that. I have time for none of this. There are usually 2 reasons that we get a hard no at the end of an intervention. And by the way, interventions are successful 85 to 90% of the time in getting the person to go to treatment that day. If you're going the day after that, we're counting that in the 10 or 15% who didn't go. It's actually an incredibly successful technique if you follow it out. There are usually 2 reasons we get a hard no. Number 1 is just testing. They don't believe that the bottom line is real. You know, as soon as they figured out that the bottom line is real, you know, that the addiction is really no longer going to be allowed to trump the welfare of the family, they go. Because every addict requires, please hear this, every addict requires an enabling system. If that enabling system is going away, their life is going to get so difficult and so unmanageable so fast, treatment is going to start to look like a good idea. And the solution is to, you know, if they're testing, then let the consequences come down. The second is control. They're willing to go, but they want to change the plan a little bit. Usually we can negotiate with this, okay? You know, like, okay, you know, you want me to go to, you know, Hazelden, Minnesota. Well, I can't do that. I'll go to La Hacienda, you know, or whatever. I want to stay closer to home. Or I'll just go to my local program here in PDAP. As long as it's okay, we'll go along with it. Your bottom line letters and your regular letters will be very helpful to the treatment team. It's their first way of learning who you are and what you're all about. And I need to skip over this as well. Family recovery is not a spectator sport. We all need to get on board with this. By the way, this is helpful with a lot of other chronic illnesses. If you have serious diabetes in the family, you can't put it all on the diabetic. Everybody's got to start thinking about what's going to be in the refrigerator. I'm going to skip over this as well. I will never forget coming into treatment myself. As you can tell by my brief introduction to my story, the clinical term is, I was an idiot, okay? I was just crazy, out of my mind, hitchhiking back and forth across the United States. I was trying to outdo the life of Jack Kerouac and be the next great American whatever. I don't know. I was just absolutely crazy and got very sick and very out of it and everything else. And I did not understand anything about this illness or anything about the way out. And the first person who really broke through to me was a fellow by the name of Dr. William Keating. I wound up, at the end of the day, thrown into a regular city hospital in Flint, Michigan, Hurley Hospital. And there I was, 26 years old, shaking, sweating, you know, just having a terrible time, just sick and awful. I mean, I was really, you know, as I said, bleeding ulcer, bleeding colon, neuropathy of the legs, very sick individual. And I'm wearing those funky little green detox pajamas, you know, that tie up in the back so your butt's hanging out, you know, and I'm just sitting there having a terrible time sitting on the side of the bed. And in strides Dr. Bill Keating. And he's a great, big, powerful black man. He's been doing alcohol and drug treatment for like 30 years. It's like James Earl Jones coming in with a white coat and a stethoscope and a clipboard, you know. It's like God walking into the room, you know. And he pulled up a chair and he got right up in my face like this and he goes, "Boy, And I was like, geez. He said, boy, you got a disease. He said, you're not responsible for what you've done. I said, great. He said, but you're responsible for what you do now. Shit. He said, your disease is incurable. The most we're going to be able to do is put it in remission. We're going to give you a program to follow, 12 steps. You follow that program, the disease will stay in remission. You stop following that program, the disease is going to kick you in the butt again. And he stood up and he walked out. I didn't know what he was talking about. But I remember that little homily as though it were yesterday, although in fact it was 1981 when I heard that. And as the days and weeks and months went by, it made more and more sense to me. And yet there was one missing ingredient. And as I got down to the end of my treatment, I spent about 10 days in the regular city hospital, and then I was transferred to a 28-day inpatient program. And I was coming to the end of that program. I realized, I was walking around one day and I realized that I was going to drink again and I was going to die. And I'd been sober long enough at this point that I was actually scared. And when you're drinking and drugging, when you're out there in the world, you're not scared. You just don't care. In fact, death seems like a little oasis out on the horizon, and if you could get there, you know what? It would be okay. That's the insanity of it. But at this point, I'd been sober long enough that, you know what? I actually did care. I didn't want to die. And I couldn't figure any way around it. I couldn't figure out how to manipulate it, how my three-quarters clever brain could somehow, manipulate it and work it, and I'd be okay, and I could go here or I could go there. None of that I knew was going to work. There was still one missing ingredient with all of the education I'd been given and all the treatment I'd been given. And I was resistant to it. I wouldn't do it because I was too smart. I was too proud. But finally at 2 o'clock in the morning, when all else failed, I did the one thing that paved the way for lifelong recovery. In fear, in desperation, with no other solution, I did this. God help me. God help me. And all of heaven opened up for me in that moment. And I knew I could stay sober. Because now I had the real power, which isn't my willpower or character or anything like that. It's God as we, each and every one of us in our individual way, understand God. And tapping into that greater power with enough humility. Maybe the most important word in the English language after gratitude. With enough humility to accept help, do the right things, and follow the directions. It worked for me, and I know it can work for you. Thanks very much.